lull and readiness to receive this next panel. We are really thrilled to hear and dig into and talk more about the importance of relationships and child well-being. And to get us started, we'll have some young people lead the way.
I need support.
I need my friends.
Support. People that care.
My parents.
Motivation from myself and others.
My family.
I need support from my family.
Good role models. My mom tell me.
I need support from people who actually care.
When they always there for me and like I could tell them about anything and they won't judge me.
When they would do things for you when you were in need, things that you can't do by you being a minor.
When I could talk to them about anything and they're there for me.
When they support the things I do and when I could talk to them.
Like if I get in trouble and they tell me what they think is right or wrong about this situation and they give me a chance to improve myself.
When you gotta go against them when they're wrong.
If they do something and you're trying to be truthful with them, but you also don't want to hurt their feelings.
Things that are hard about being a good friend is drama and being there for when they most need it, when things are also going on in your life.
I'd like to introduce our moderator for this panel. Dr. Lisa Damour is an author, researcher, international speaker, psychologist, and lucky for us at the Schubert Center, a senior advisor at the center. Just to name a few of the balls that Lisa regularly has juggling in the air at any given time, and I know I'm going to miss a bunch. She writes a monthly column for the New York Times. She's a regular contributor to CBS News. Check her out in the morning. She maintains a private psychotherapy practice. She serves as the executive director of Laurel School's Center for Research on Girls. In addition to numerous academic papers and chapters and books related to education and child development, Lisa is a New York Times bestseller with her most recent book, Untangled, Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood. If you haven't read it, check it out, especially if you have girls in your life. And when it comes to relationships, we are indeed in good hands with Dr. Lisa Damour, and we're thrilled to have her here as a moderator for our panel. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Gabriella. I'm so glad you're all here. We are going to have such a good panel. I'm honored to get to moderate it. We're going to talk about parent-adolescent relationships. I have a special place in my heart for that. About using technology to promote healthy parent-child relationships from their earliest beginnings, from the moment a child is born. About supporting culturally relevant rites of passage. About creating connections for young people who are aging their way out of the foster care system. We're going to talk about how we provide wraparound services to the people who are supporting children so that they can better support them. And we're going to talk about fathers and their role in the lives of children. When I think about that graphic, you know, kind of the classic onion model of the kids at the center and then everything's around, so relationships are the closest circle. Right? We have the child and we have the relationships all around them. So we're really in the groundwater here, which is where I like to be. And I'm a psychologist. And for years, the first 100 years of my field, when we tried to understand people, we tried to figure out what went wrong. All of our work was looking at what went wrong. And we call it the deficit model. We'd have people who came in who were struggling, and then we'd try to unpack why they were struggling. And then about 30 years ago, people said, what if we looked at people who were doing extraordinarily well in spite of horrendous circumstances? What if we tried to figure out what was going on with them? And so that work began. And over and over, there was a single finding, which is that people who thrived in contexts where people should not be expected to thrive had somebody, some person, usually just one, who was absolutely devoted to that child. And my favorite favorite way I've ever heard this described is that somebody had an irrational attachment to that child. And I think that's what every kid needs, somebody who is rooting for them and has their back every step of the way. So the thing I'm hoping to get out of this panel is to think about what are all of the ways we cultivate irrational attachments in children, in all of the different mechanisms we have. So the two big questions on my mind are, what structures can we put in place to support these relationships? And then second, what actually occurs in the context of these structures to really, really create the bonds that we know children need? So I'm going to turn it over to our excellent panelists. You'll notice on your table tent that there's the information for how to participate in the swipe activity. So you could even take a moment, because we'll do that halfway through. We'll stop. So you could take a moment and get that ready on your phone. But I'm going to take it away with our panel. Here's who we have. We have Dr. Mark Groner, a clinical director at Beech Brook. We have Charniece Holmes, the program director at Family Connections. We have Dr. Debra Wasserman, who's a senior research associate, lifelong learning group at COSI and collaborator at the National Rites of Passage. And then we'll have our break where we do our swiping. And then we'll have Amber Donovan, director of the Cuyahoga County Open Table Initiative. And then Dr. Jane Timmons-Mitchell, a clinical psychologist and senior research associate with the CWRU Beacon Center for Violence Prevention, Research, and Education. And then we'll wrap up with Steve Kilpack, the executive director of the Healthy Fathering Collaborative of Greater Cleveland. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mark Groner to take us away.
Thank you so much for having me. I should mention that I'm Mr. Mark Groner. I have a master's degree in social work from SAS, now MSSA, or the Mandel School. Anyway, I'm so glad to be here to talk about a wonderful new model that we are implementing at Beech Brook. And just to give you some background, studies of infants, young children, and adults suggest that early parent-child interaction is crucial for success all throughout one's life. Research also demonstrates that securely attached adolescents are less likely to engage in antisocial and aggressive behaviors. So we know now that parents can help to promote their teenagers' capacities for secure attachments even during adolescence. And I want to mention that I used to believe that in adolescence, because the process of individuation takes kids away from parents, that parents really couldn't influence attachment and have close relationships. We used to call it the period of storm and stress. And, you just hope your adolescent grew up in spite of some of the passion, and that parents really had little they could do to help. That's not true. Connect is an attachment-based parenting program that was developed to strengthen the building blocks of attachment by advancing parental reflective functioning and parental capacities for sensitivity, empathy, and dyadic affect regulation. Those are lots of big words. What it really means is parents can really help their teenagers by getting into their shoes and having empathy. This model has several key principles. All behavior has meaning. It's a very simple idea, but a very important one for parents to understand. Principle 2, attachment is for life. The need for attachment continues from cradle to grave, but how it's expressed changes over time. Principle 3, conflict is part of attachment. How many of you have completely conflict-free relationships? Principle 4, autonomy includes connection. To be autonomous, you have to move away from someone that you're connected to. Secure attachment balances connection and independence. So you always stay connected, even as you pursue your independence, to the attachment figures that you carry in your head. If not, play an active part in your life. Empathy is the heartbeat of attachment. It supports growth and strengthens relationships. And I think this is probably the most important slide I'm going to show today. And the reason I say that is because I think we live in such a fast-paced world that it's really hard to take the time always to listen and to understand and to put yourself in the shoes of other people, including adolescents. I can't, I find that when I'm trying to give people my undivided attention, I'm being bombarded with stimuli and stopping to, and I've really had to discipline myself to really try hard to give people my undivided time and to get rid of the distractions. Principle number 6, balancing our needs with the needs of others. Relationships thrive when we have empathy and we balance our needs. And really what this is all about is, as parents or significant others in the lives of adolescents, or really children also, it's not about always self-sacrifice. If you don't get your own needs as a nurturer, you're going to have trouble. Got to nurture the nurturer. Growth and change are part of relationships. They involve moving forward while understanding the past. Celebrating attachment. Attachment brings joy and pain, but it's something to be celebrated. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. When we're parenting children, there are going to be ups and downs. It's just normal. And there are my citations. So I have, I think, 1 minute. So I get to break away from the presentation. So I can say to you, this is a model that was developed at Simon Fraser, and the NE Foundation brought this parenting model to the United States, and Beech Brook was the first agency in the whole U.S. that we think has started to implement this model. And we're going to be disseminating the model in the community and throughout the USA. It's been implemented all over Canada, all over Sweden, and now in Australia and Italy, and now in the USA. And it's a wonderful model. And it really helps parents listen to their kids and respond understanding that every piece of behavior has meaning. So it may be that the parent needs to understand to let go and to give rope. It may mean understanding the teenager needs to be pulled closely. And the model has 2 parts. 1 part is for biological relatives, and another part is for foster parents. So I'd love to talk to you more about it. You can see I'm very excited.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Charniece Holmes, and I work with Family Connections, and I have 7 minutes, so I'm cutting up half of my speech. So I'm going to digress, and I want to take you back. We talk about relationships, and I want to talk about the importance of relationship between a parent and a teacher. 22 years ago, my son was about to start kindergarten, and I decided that I didn't want my kid to go to the neighborhood school. So I decided to go visit that kindergarten classroom. And so the principal said, I have the perfect teacher for you. And I'm like, no. She's yes. And so I went to go meet this kindergarten teacher. And what she said to me was that she had a son that went through the district and that her son's needs were met and what a wonderful experience it was for her son. At that time, it was so heartfelt. And so when I left there, it was like, okay, you have a friend for life. I'm a parent for life. So that following year, my son started kindergarten in her classroom. I was the room mom. My son was the 3 pigs that built the house of bricks. And so when the wolf came to blow it down, it was just because she had this epic play every year, and my son was the star. However, in December, she came to me and she said, Charniece, the expectation is that your child should be reading in kindergarten, and he is not. I had to pick my face, my ego, and everything off the floor. I came back about a week later and said, okay, I got it. What do I need to do? How can we work together? So we came up with a plan. Needless to say, he did pass kindergarten. He went on to write a college essay about Hooked on Phonics and how Hooked on Phonics got him through elementary school. And he got accepted in 11 of the 14 colleges. So now to the serious work here. And so one of the things as part of our program, we work with kindergarten families in Cleveland Heights, Shaker, in the city of Cleveland. And when our families come in, they bring us their best. And what we find sometimes is that parents, and so I've got a booth. Okay. So I had a real aha moment. Since my kids have been gone, and my kids are 26 and 28, last week I had my real aha moment. Someone delivered my nephew, his 5-year-old and his 18-month-old, to my house, and I had them for a week. I had compassion for my families. A lot of times, our families will say, we have a home visitation program, and our families will say, I can't do it, I don't have time. So I'm in school, I work full-time, and so when these guys came to my house, my family room that's usually clean now looks like Toys R Us. This 18-month-old, I had to follow around all over the place. If someone would have called and said, Charniece, could we do a home visit? My response would have been, no. Charniece, can you come to a family literacy night? No, no, no. And so, but my nephews are statistics. 25% of the kids that we work with in Cleveland Heights are kids who start to school without knowing their alphabet or the basic skills that they need to be successful. And so my nephews, are that statistic. And so we started asking ourselves as a staff, why are parents not taking advantage of our program? We provide childcare, we provide food, we come into their home. What else can we do? So most of our parents, a lot of times, they don't know what the expectations are of kindergarten. They don't know their child's strengths and weaknesses. They feel that if their kids can sing the ABC songs, they know the ABC song. They know their alphabet, so they're ready for school. There's also this disconnection between home and school. For academic success, and I'm going to borrow your word where you talked about empathy, the classroom teacher in kindergarten, she was very empathetic when she told me that my son was not on track. But she also was very transparent and very frank. And so that developed a sense of trust and communication, and it really made a difference in my life and my son's life. So now, how does technology come into play? As a staff, we were trying to figure out, what can we do? What can we do to engage our parents? We have 4 times during the school year that we have human interactions, that we're touching the families. So we have 2 summer programs. We have a program in the fall. So we get to meet the families and be sort of their liaison to the schools. And we're in 7 elementary schools in Cleveland Heights. However, I found by using technology, the parents, after a while, when I send home flyers by Book Bag Express, they're like, no, they're not paying any attention. So I sent them a text. And the text says, I am a pest. I'm a pest that cares about your child. And I'm going to pester you until we can get you to come to the school. And if I'm bothering you, please let me know. Now, I sent this text to 12 parents. Not one parent called and said, Charniece, stop texting me. Now, they lovingly call me Charniece the lovely pest. And so what we wanted to do is to find out, what can we do to engage our families to get them to start to come to school? So one of the things that we decided to do is we started a YouTube project. So we have 15 families who decided that they would come and create videos around the kindergarten curriculum. And so what those families do is they all came in. We used some iPads that we got from Cleveland Heights schools to create the videos. And it was all based on the kindergarten curriculum. And so our families came in and created videos, and then we uploaded them on YouTube. And the teachers send home a link. So any area where a kid is struggling, they could go to those links. And then they call us to get additional activities. So in closing, when I was in kindergarten, okay. So in closing, there is a poem. And I want you guys to all raise your hand. And I want you to think about children as clay. Unity. Okay. And it's a unity. And what it says is, I dreamed I stood in a studio. And I want you to rub your hands together like our kids are clay. I dreamed I stood in a studio and watched sculptures there. The clay they used was a young child's mind, and they fashioned it with care. One was a teacher. The tools he used were books, music, and art, and a parent with a guiding hand. And they polished and they smoothed it over. And when at the last their task was done, they were proud of what they had brought, for this thing they had molded into a child could neither be sold or bought. And each agreed that they would have failed if they had worked alone. For behind the parent stood the school, and behind the school teacher stood the home. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Wasserman, and I am once again honored to be able to be a voice for the National Rites of Passage Institute. I've worked with Paul Hill and Fanon Hill for the last 15 years or so, it seems, maybe a little less. And I'm honored to be here with all of you today, because I want to set the stage, actually, before I talk, with a poem by a young man who had been through Rites of Passage programming when he wrote this. And he says, I am Cameron Levon White, an African-American born in Cleveland, Ohio. I am the son of Laguerre and Miranda White. My ancestors are African, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. I am an artist, tall, dark, and handsome, and I work hard because I know without an education I can't succeed. As a photographer or percussionist, I know I have talent, which gives me the confidence I need to lead. I am Cameron Levon White, an African American. For Cameron, I thank you. So where did Cameron get this charge of sense of self? He got it through a sense of culture and what's called rites of passage programming. And Cleveland happens to be rich in it because of the work of Paul Hill Jr., who's sitting here with us. And so I wanted to talk about his work. And also his son, where am I, which one? Here we go. Yes, here's Fanon Hill, who's also sitting with us, who hopefully this is where Cameron will go. So Fanon grew up in a rites of passage cultural kind of setting. In other words, he had community. And earlier you were talking about how psychology started about what's wrong and then we moved to what's right. I would like to think that those were all about the individual psyche. And I would like to think that in our 21st century, our work now is the development of community and to understand that we as human beings are part of community and who we are. We know from Vygotsky, right, who said that we have cultural learning and it comes from a social setting. And that's our missing link. So I'm going to spend my probably 4 minutes that are left talking about what is this that we know from ages gone by about this amazing ecological balance between a community and its children. Whoop, I just lost my tag. So, thank you. Okay, so the idea of rites of passage is based on a concept called Sankofa that comes from a saying that's translated as, it is not taboo to go back and fetch what you forgot. So what does forgetting have to do with community and with children? I want to say that, oh, how did you do that? Okay, thank you. Forgetting is what happens to human beings when we're living on this planet. We interact with every possible conflict that comes up, and if we're poor, it's even worse. And if we have all kinds of, as we just talked about, relationships are filled with conflict, and our lives are filled with conflict, and we forget what we knew before we were born and what we go back to afterwards. That there's some kind of source energy, perhaps, or a knowledge that exists. And in some traditions, we call that knowledge messages from ancestors, or knowledge that our ancestors know and still inform us about. I think many cultures have many different ways of relating to whatever that knowledge place is. So in rites of passage programming, and in this I call it almost a pristine ecological system, that what happens is that a community needs that knowledge, but it's made up of adults who have forgotten all about it. So what does a community need to survive? It needs to connect to the people who are closest to that knowledge, which are those little tiny babies that are born onto the planet. And then our job as a community is, let's make sure that they don't forget. How do we make sure that this little one grows up trusting itself enough to know, herself or himself, enough to know that there's an inner knowledge to be drawn from? And how do we get the community to trust that voice when that voice comes to us, as Fanon is now coming to us, saying, wait a minute, community is not just geographic. Right now, community is when Freddie Gray is murdered by police in Baltimore, that the kids in East Cleveland suffer. And when there's murders in the police murder, I'm going to forget, Ms. Williams and Mr. Russell in the parking lot of Heritage Middle School, those kids in Cherry Hill community in Baltimore City hear it fast and they feel it. And we adults need to bridge beyond our geographic limits and create communities beyond that. That's something new. That's what our children bring to us, if we trust them. So we talk about self-determination in individuals and in communities, and I mentioned that this is a Kujichagulia is a Kwanzaa principle, and this is what I study. We talk about sense of competence, sense of relatedness, and sense of autonomy, which I will quickly say is choice making that's free from tension, pressure, or ambiguity. And when we address those pieces in any human being, by whatever, there are all kinds of different ways of generating those senses, but that's when we create self-determination. Now, without it, there's need frustration, which leads to this kind of reactive autonomy. And so rites of passage programming, let me just wrap it up to say that from this cultural place of knowing who we are, we find the strength that Cameron found to write that poem. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we're going to work together on these fantastic questions. You pull it up. Have people been able to get in? And are they on the fantastic? Okay, so here we go. Question number 1. Oops. I'm going to read the question. Which of the following do you think best defines family in the context of raising a child? 1, parents and siblings. 2, all household members. 3, any blood-related or adopted or foster relatives. 4, whomever is caring for the child at home. 5, both household and relatives outside the home, or finally, whomever the child considers family. Okay, so we have pretty strong consensus that it's up to the child to decide who family is. Okay, let's do the next one. So here it is. When it comes to teenagers, I think they are very influenced by their peers, but still care what their parents and other key adults have to say. Agree or not? 1, I mostly agree. 2, I disagree. Peers totally rule. 3, I disagree. Adults matter more. 4, who knows? They're teenagers. Okay, well, we've got a very strong front runner here. It's getting stronger. Okay, I think we feel that they do care about their peers and also what adults have to say. Okay, let's do the next one. There it is. Okay, what role do you think social media plays when it comes to facilitating positive peer relationships for our children? Social media, 1, has been mostly positive for relationships. 2, is a tool that can be used for ill or good. 3, is more destructive than good in relationships. And finally, huh? Or hashtag, huh? Okay, again, we have a very strong front runner here. It is a tool that is either a force for good or ill, depending on how it's used. Okay, and I think Charnice's presentation really drives that home. It's a fantastic tool when used for good. Okay, let's do the next one. To what extent do you believe that Cleveland ensures that all of our children are adequately cared for and protected? I believe that Cleveland is, and then you'll fill in blank, in caring for and protecting. 1, excellent. 2, somewhat effective. 3, not effective enough, but striving to improve. 4, all talk and no action. Wow, we have very clear consensus in this room. This is a room with a lot of agreement in it. We feel that it's not effective enough, but striving to improve. Okay, let's do our last question. When it comes to supporting families, social policies such as food assistance, income support, housing stability, childcare assistance, etc., 1, are often a force for good. 2, are often unhelpful. 3, don't do nearly enough. 4, cannot address the real problems families face. Or 5, are something I'd like to learn more about. This is an interesting one. Okay, so the majority, but not a huge majority, growing majority, feel that Cleveland does not do nearly enough for our kids. Some feel that policies cannot address the real problems families face, and many would like to learn more about this. Okay, let me introduce our next 3 panelists. So we will start with Amber Donovan, the director of the Cuyahoga County Open Table Initiative, and then move on to Dr. Jane Timmons-Mitchell, who is a clinical psychologist and senior research associate at the CWRU Beacon Center for Violence Prevention Research and Education, and then Steve Kilpack, the executive director of the Healthy Fathering Collaborative of Greater Cleveland. All right, Amber.
Good morning. I want to thank the Schubert Center for allowing me to be here today to talk to you about my passion. I've started a nonprofit called Community of Hope because Cleveland is a community of hope. And inside of this little nonprofit lives the Cleveland Open Table Initiative, which is a public-private partnership with many partners around the community. Cuyahoga County invested early and first, and then the National Council of Jewish Women, churches, and the YWCA of Greater Cleveland have really come to support this. So my heart and my passion and most of my time goes to connecting youth who grew up in foster care and didn't return home or get adopted. They connect with groups of volunteers who've committed to spend time with them and with each other for a year. They come together around tables all around our city for 1 hour a week for a year. And that first year is just the beginning. Because we know that if we want to change lives, we have to take the time that it takes to get into a relationship. We use this open table model out of Phoenix.
When I was in kindergarten, my parent-teacher.
Sorry, that's okay. And we recruit 6 to 8 adult volunteers from all walks of life, from all around our city. We welcome everyone that wants to sit at a table around the table with us. It started with churches, and then it's grown into nonprofits and the business community. We launched our first PNC-sponsored table 2 weeks ago, and it's just really exciting to see people are hungry for relationship. Not just our young people, but people in our community want to do something. And so when this model came along, they were like, sign me up. And at the beginning, I've been doing this since 2014. When I would go to places and say, you have to give me an hour a week for a year and sit around a table with a young person, people looked at me like I had like 3 heads. They were like, I have a very busy schedule. And I said, I know. But we spend time on things that are important. We spend time with people who are important. And so if we can change the life of one person, we can change a community. It's a one person at a time model. So how do we do this? People sign up, they fill out a volunteer application on my website, hopeclee.org. And, is this it? Oh yeah, okay, so I haven't been looking at that. And so basically what we do is that we start with a young person. Young people come to me from Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services, Ohio Guidestone, the YWCA of Greater Cleveland, and sometimes they just call me. They just have my number and they say, I would like a group of people. Now, I don't know if you guys remember when you were 18. Some of you might still be 18, but you probably I'll speak for myself, have signed up to sit around a table with a group of adults, 6 to 8 strangers, every week for a year to share my life. I wouldn't have done that. And maybe that's because I had people in my life that were my mentors. However, these young people are hungry for relationship. They're hungry to move forward in their life, and they're hungry to learn the skills that they think we might have that could help them do that. So everybody comes to the table. We launch a table with something called the breaking of the bread. It is a giant potluck filled with pasta. I've had so much pasta this month that I'm going to have to go on a diet. But it is a wonderful celebration, and there are sometimes tears, there's laughter, where people sit around the table with a young person and they say, this is why I believe in you before I even knew you. I signed up to sit on a table because I knew that you were worth it. We are restoring hope to children who have not had hope, because their lives growing up have been filled with PTSD and traumatic experiences. So the table model you can see up there, everyone around the table has a role. But the task is secondary to the relationship building, because we know that people change when they're heard, when we let them tell their story. So we hold space for them around the table in a way that is sacred. And that is what changes people's lives. We meet in homes, we meet in libraries, we meet at the YWCA, and we launched our 23rd table last night. So it's wonderful, thank you. But we don't just serve 23 young people, because about 60% of our young people are parents. So we want to love their kids too. We want to break cycles of poverty, cycles of abuse, cycles of things that shouldn't be in our community. So 81% of our youth are working, 56% of them are working full-time, many of them are in college. We've just created a new partnership with some of the local colleges to provide tables for young people who've aged out of foster care, because we know that the rate of graduation from college is low, and we want to improve that because we know education is a really big determinant, right? So 100% of our young people are also housed. We have 0 youth that are homeless if they have a table. Thank you. So the people around the table are amazing, and they use their social and intellectual capital and their networks on the behalf of their young person. Oftentimes when people are in poverty, we give them water bottles, granola bars, our used stuff. But we believe that if we want to help people get out of poverty, that we're going to use our networks and our social capital and the things that we know to help our friends and our children have a better future. We know that research really shows that social support is key to improving outcomes. Richard Rohr said it best when he said, "Pain that is not transformed will be transmitted." We want to stop the bleeding in all aspects of our kids' lives. We were honored, Armin Budish at the State of the County. We created a video. And I would like to show that video because I want you to hear the youth voice, because that is the number one thing that we believe in. So this is a table example from the YWCA. We were featured in a Greater Cleveland in the Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com since January, and we have over 170 new volunteers signed up to sit on tables. We have about 30 new tables getting ready to launch in the next 6 months. So we want to start this video so you can hear from them. Yeah, that's it. Yep. Cuyahoga County invested 2 years ago in the Open Table Initiative, a group mentoring initiative.
Open Table is about new friends transforming together.
People from diverse backgrounds are coming together from all over the greater Cleveland area to serve young adults aging out of foster care. Volunteers don't need to be experts, but each takes a role: housing, occupation, education, healthcare, transportation, and finances. Table members work together and they leverage who they know and what they know to increase opportunities for their young friend. And as a result, everyone around the table is transformed.
I love all you guys. I'm just so grateful. And everything that you guys are trying to do with me is definitely, we're going to keep growing together. And I know we all have learned from each other, so that's definitely going to continue to keep happening.
I love you too, Ebony.
Open Table is a great opportunity to have a family.
We say there's always room around the table, so if you want to get involved, please go to the county website to learn more. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you to the Schubert Center for having me here. I'm Jane Timmons-Mitchell, and I work at the Begun Center for Violence Prevention Research and Education at the, here's long, Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences here at Case. Sorry, we have to get the whole thing in, so here we are. I want to acknowledge Karen Storman, who's the co-author of this presentation, sitting here in the front. And I also want to acknowledge the team that worked on this presentation, Laura Overman, Jeff Hong, Misty Luminez, and Elizabeth Larkin at the Begun Center. So, you know, I've been listening to all these inspirational, aren't these wonderful? These inspirational presentations. And yeah, and, you know, it seems to me that we're all talking about engendering hope. And so I'm a little bit of an outlier here because instead of focusing most and talking about the program itself, I'm going to talk about the evaluation of the program. But I think that that's also a way to get hope because we need to know that what we're doing is working and we need to know that it's working over time. So I'm going to talk about the wraparound model for child safety and well-being. And this is a result from an ongoing initiative. We've been doing this for a long time. It's a lot of we, but about 10 years. And what we've been doing is evaluating wraparound. Everybody probably knows what wraparound is, but I'll just say it's a community planning process primarily, and in Cuyahoga County, including case management, implemented at 6 local child agencies, Applewood, Beech Brook, Belfair, Guidestone, Catholic Charities, Presley Ridge. I think I got everybody. Okay, thank you. So I want to tell you about what we've been doing in the evaluation, how what we did was new this year. So that's what I'm going to do. So the purpose is to assess the to assess the effectiveness of Tapestry. That's what the wraparound program is called, involvement for families. There's a process part, which is fidelity to the process, which I'm not going to talk about so much, but it's kind of interesting because for evidence-based practices, you need to know that they're being delivered with fidelity. Otherwise, you don't expect to get outcomes. And outcomes primarily in child welfare, juvenile court, and mental health. Wraparound aims to prevent placement for at-risk youth, and so the placement outcomes are one of the things that are going to be key. So here's a bunch of numbers. We're talking about our time period was from 2012 through 2016, and it included 1,700 youth, which is a lot of people. And the reason that we wanted to have a lot of people was so that we could actually say some things about it. You need to have a lot of people to say some important things. And so first of all, descriptively, so we've got a mean age of 14 years. Over 2/3 are African American, and then, other races a little bit. Here's some wonderful infographics, which Elizabeth Larkin was our infographic guru, and I think she did a wonderful job. And probably the most important piece of this slide is the bottom of it, where we're talking about the things that might lead kids to placement. So 82% of the kids involved of the 1712 had allegations, 13% had placements, 62% were court involved, and 85% had mental health issues. So that's a lot of involvement potentially in other systems. The thing that was new about our evaluation this year was that we tried to draw a comparison group, which is hard because, we want to get the kids that are like the other kids that are being referred to Tapestry. That hadn't been done before, but where were we going to get that group? So what we did was we pulled a subgroup from the group that had been referred. So we looked at the kids who had been enrolled in Tapestry for 30 days or less, because when we went into that sample, we figured out that those were kids who had been enrolled kind of optimistically thinking that we're going to get them involved. And then if you disenrolled at 30 days or less, probably you didn't get too involved. So it was the best no treatment control that we could come up with. It was a smaller group, but that was our comparison group. The other variable of interest that we were looking at, I'm going to tell you about, was the administration of the Ohio scales, which you may know is a series of questionnaires that were developed by Ben Ogles, then at Ohio University, hence the name Ohio Scales. And they have versions for parents, for teachers, for youth, for workers that work with kids. We were amazed to find that in the Ohio scales for this group of kids, there was a 56% reduction in the need for mental health services during Tapestry. Now, the reason that seemed pretty incredible, and here's the infographic where, whoops, oh my, what happened? There it is, okay, got it. So we found that 85% of the kids who were in treatment evidenced mental health needs according to the Ohio scales at the beginning, at their first administration when they enrolled in Tapestry, and then only 37% at the end, which we found incredible because wraparound is not primarily a mental health treatment. But this was a pretty great reduction, and we were just really thrilled to see that you could do that by implementing that process. Why does that happen? Well, what happens in a wraparound team is you bring everybody who's important to the kid in the kid's life, stressing the relationships together, and you plan and you implement and you use the relationships to help the kid do better. So we thought that was a really pretty incredible result. The placement data, here's where we look at the comparison sample. So we're able to look at both the placements of all of the children, and then we're also going to look at the placements sort of apples to apples, right? The kids who had a placement, because, it's kind of a wash if you're looking at just all of the kids, right? But even among all of the kids, what is happening here? There we go. If you look at all of the kids that had a DCFS placement, this is across the two samples. So there's 23 fewer days among the kids who were in the Tapestry sample, but here's the really important one, that if you compare, so the kids who were the no treatment control, right, if you compared them with the Tapestry sample, the kids that got wraparound, and if you only looked at the kids in each of those samples who had a placement, so that's your apples to apples, you get like 100 fewer days in placement for the kids who were involved with Tapestry, which we think is a pretty compelling statistic. It talks about how important it is for kids to use these relationships, use them effectively to stay in home, in school. So the conclusions, we know that it works. Really briefly, so once worked with a young man who was 15, had been in placement in the system, various different placements, I don't even know how many, since he was 2. Came into wraparound at 13, was being discharged at 15, ran his own discharge meeting. And, just the progress that you see in that, he was able to be stabilized with a family member who had aged in to the age when the family member could care for him, ending a cycle of running away from countless foster care placements. It's hope, right? It's hope at the individual level. It's hope across the 1,700 kids. And I'm just very pleased to be able to deliver that story. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning. So I want to say first that it's really a pleasure to be speaking to an audience where 2/3 of you believe that family is defined from a child's perspective. I'm going to guess that, thank you. I'm going to guess that if I was speaking to the Ohio General Assembly this morning, the numbers would be a little bit different. So it's good to be with advocates. But unfortunately, our current social policy supports single custodial households, not families. That's why we need to talk about policy reform today. But first, I want to tell you a little story. I started my social work career working with runaway and homeless youth. All of them you would describe as coming from single-parent households with absent fathers. But as I got to know them and they talked about their fathers, I realized their fathers were not absent in their hearts. And so I reached out to their dads because they craved connecting with their dads, even if there had been pain in the past. And as I reached out to their fathers, I learned exactly the same thing. Children were not absent in those fathers' lives. Most of them broke down in tears and told me a long story of their struggles with parenting or personal barriers, relationship barriers, or systemic barriers. So that experience led me to my career, which has been focused on bringing fathers back into children's lives. And it also made me a policy nerd, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Whoop. Should we do this one? Okay. So twice? Just once here or twice. Okay. So I'm going to talk about unmarried parents, because over 75% of the babies born in the city of Cleveland are born to unmarried parents. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that, but huge issue. So first, let's look at policies that support single custodial unmarried parents and their children. We have a wonderful wide array of policies that support these families. All of them, the eligibility is defined by the census's definition of a family, which is a custodial parent household, and also Ohio law, which awards 100% of custody of a child born to unmarried parents to the mother. Now let's look at policies that support unmarried non-custodial parents, which would be a father, a second parent. Imagine fathers and second parents being involved in their children's lives, putting them to sleep, taking them to school, providing food and resources to the home, even if they don't live with them. We have none. We have no policies supporting unmarried, non-custodial parents in their kids' lives. We have punitive policies related to child support, and we have programs to help those fathers and second parents try to get through their barriers, but we have no supportive policies of them as parents. So let's quickly look at some of the policy barriers that these non-custodial parents face, because these really are our opportunities for social policy reform. So right at the top of the list again is the census. The census defines these individuals as single adults, not as parents. So we have absolutely no data about non-custodial fathers and non-custodial second parents, which makes it very difficult to develop policies and programs to serve them. And then second is Ohio law, which gives a unmarried parent no legal access to their children, and we have no friendly public policy to help them achieve that access. So that means that they have no eligibility for any of those wonderful social welfare programs that custodial parents do. So a little bit of positive news. We actually, when I applied to speak here today, I was really worried, and I was hoping hoping that something would happen, but there was no progress going on. But in the last 9 months, we've actually had some really cool things happen. There are two wonderful policy movements moving forward in Ohio that I want to tell you about. First is Ohio Department of Health home visiting programs, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. They've provided home visiting programs for single custodial mothers and their children for decades. Beginning July 1st of this year, home visiting programs will now be available for all parents and caregivers in a child's life. So they have redesigned their program to define family from a child's perspective. This is absolutely huge. So home visits will go to fathers, grandparents, any caregiver in a kid's life. Now this is a really, thank you. That's about 12 years of advocacy there. This is a really heavy lift to move this policy from policy to practice. So I really want to ask you all to promote this news as much as you can and help us move it to practice. So the second thing is really nerdy, is child support reform, which I've also been working on for about 12 years. Our current child support policy was written in 1992. It funnels all of child support resources into the single parent, non-custodial parent household. Child support orders are often set so high beyond the non-custodial parent's ability to pay that they go underground. So the custodial household doesn't get any money and the parent doesn't get to see his kids. So we have two bills moving through the Ohio General Assembly right now, in the Senate and the House. They've actually passed both of those, but they now have to bring them together. And this is a bipartisan initiative, which is unbelievable in this time period. But they have two things: a self-sufficiency reserve, which would preserve enough money in the non-custodial parent's household so that they can maintain stability, be involved in their kids' lives, and make regular child support payments staying above ground. The second time is a parenting time credit. So when a child spends time in that other family household, they get a credit for that time. So child support would shift from something that supports a custodial parent household to something that follows a child. So I'm going to stop there because the EITC looks dead after tax reform that we all saw in December. But I do want to say before I step down and we continue this conversation, I hope I can count on all of you as to be advocates with me as we move forward with these issues. Thanks a lot.
The breadth and then depth, right, of what we get to hear about in the work on relationships in this community is just profoundly moving, really. I have two questions that I'd like for everyone on the panel to answer them. I'm going to tell you them both so you can think about your answers, but I want us to answer them in this order. So I'm going to do granular and I'm going to do 30,000 feet. So here's my granular question that I want us to start with, which is, what do you think the single most powerful thing an adult can do to build a growth-giving relationship with a child? What is the single most powerful thing an adult can do to build a growth-giving relationship with a child? So that's the granular question. When we've answered that, my next question is, if I had $5 million to give you for your work, what would you do with it? Who wants to start with the granular question? Oh, Mark, start us off with an answer to the granular question.
I think the most important thing that an adult can do is listen with empathy. And it's very interesting. The Connect model has a way of conveying empathy that's different than I've ever done it before. And I find it really works.
Oops.
And it can be learned. And so with in the Connect model, the teenagers never show up. It's all work with the parent, and with the parents working in their own homes with their own children, they can influence the quality of attachment. And that's a pretty exciting idea to me.
Great. Thank you. Charniece.
I think just on a basic level, just time. So many parents are so overwhelmed with all the things that are going on in their lives. So just to spend time with one child, if they have multiple children, just to take 5 minutes, just to spend some quality time with that child. I think that's so critical.
Terrific. Deborah.
Well, I, of course, initially would say listen, and listen with a belief in that child's strength. But I also, coming from this perspective of rites of passage, I think that what we as adults can do, the one thing we can do is provide a sense of community to our children. And not only that there are people in the community that care about the child, but that child has something, the belief that that child has something very important and unique to provide back to the community.
I totally agree. I think we have to look at the capacity, the potential that kids have, and I think we have to explore that. But for me, with young people, I think the most important way to do that is to meet them where they are, not having that expectation that they have to join us with what we want to do, but really entering into their world and what they're interested in, and really not trying to shift them away for our idea of their life, but to really look at who they are and who they want to become in their life and really join them and support them in that.
So how many ways to say the same thing? I think be there, show up, be dependable. I was struck by some of the things that Mark was talking about in the Connect model. And, I remember way back from attachment theory and stuff, you have to be there to be left, right? You can't separate from somebody who isn't consistent. So I think it's just being there, being dependable, somebody that the kid can count on.
Well, Amber stole my favorite phrase, which is meet them where they are. But this takes me back actually to my work with street youth. And I learned quickly that the only kids that got off the street were the ones that had one adult, at least in their lives, that believed in them and had stayed in touch with them.
Terrific. Okay, so now let's go huge. Should we start with Mark?
I have to say that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I just came from the early intervention group, and I'm thinking about how important those first years of life are. And I think I would go to prevention, early intervention. In fact, that is the transformation that's going on at Beech Brook. The organization, as many of you know, closed the residential program at the peak of its success, in my opinion. But it was understood that we were investing so much money to help kids that were it was questionable how much it was helping them as opposed to having them in families. And the reason for doing it was to really try to invest upstream to make a difference. And I think if I had a lot of money, that's what I'd do.
There's so many nonprofits that are struggling financially. And so I would give some of those dollars to those nonprofit organizations. But I think also we have so many kids now who are struggling with trauma, and something around trauma-informed care would be just fantastic, and resources for the schools. So many classrooms. I think about a classroom I have. We have 5 kids who are kindergarten. On any given day, they're throwing things, they're flipping around the room. We had a kindergartner try to commit suicide. And the teachers don't have the resources, they don't have the wherewithal, we don't have enough social workers. And then you have 15 other kids in the classroom, and they're supposed to learn. So I probably need more than $5 million, but I'll start there.
It's all fantasy, so you can have 10. Yeah.
Really, $5 million doesn't sound like a lot anymore, does it?
Yeah.
I think that we have confronted with this idea and this sort of, we can say create community, but what is that? And responsible adults, and what are they, and where do they come from? And I go back to James Comer. Does anybody remember his work? Where there were social workers in all of the schools and who were working one-on-one with kids, and he took the social workers all off of one-on-one work and put them into groups with parents and teachers. And suddenly the school transformed, where there wasn't much happening, just working with kids. So I would want lots of millions of dollars to create to work with the fear among adults that keeps us from creating community. What keeps us from recognizing our neighbor and holding hands with our neighbor or listening? Never mind, as an older person, saying, yes, I have the wisdom to return who I am to the community, as opposed to living in fear, especially when I'm living in poverty. The issues are huge, and I would want at least $5 million to begin to deal with that issue.
So I'm a small, brand new nonprofit, so that would help me get some people to help me do this so that I could not have pasta every night, but I still love it. I was part of something called the Plan to End Youth Homelessness in Cuyahoga County, with a plan with a place for me out of the YWCA that Kate Lodge has really championed. And Open Table is just one of the little initiatives that kind of came out of that. Mentoring was something that was identified as an important part of helping keep kids housed. So I have a passion around keeping kids housed. And one of the things that we are really interested in bringing to Cuyahoga County is a youth drop-in center. Both Columbus has one, Dayton has one, Cincinnati has one. Cleveland does not have one. And so really a vision that I have is a 24/7 location where young people who are currently on the street, runaways, living in their car, living in abandoned houses, people we don't even know where they are or who they are, could come into a safe place, have an open kitchen, have dignity restored, have security, and build trust so that they can move forward in their life. We know suicidality is super high in our young people who are homeless. And of course, where is their hope? So I would use $5 million to start a drop-in center for homeless youth.
So as an evaluation person, evaluation tends to be expensive. I think I would use the $5 million to evaluate the effective ingredients of what everybody's doing, partly because you need to know. I mean, you need to know for funders, right? Funders want to know that. And I guess my fantasy piece would be, for example, in unpacking what we know is effective about Tapestry, we don't know what's effective for whom. And so doing that, that's huge. That's much bigger. But that's kind of what I want to know, the ingredients, the effective ingredient for each child going in, so that we can sort of put a profile together and track people into what's going to be the most effective, the best bang for our buck going forward.
Well, this is a really tough one for me, Lisa, because I've realized that programs and money doesn't change policies that are dividing families. Okay, thank you. But I have this dream, and so I might as well use it for that. Right now, when paternity is established between a father and their child that they had out of wedlock, that only launches the child support collection process. And I have this dream that we could recreate that moment as a moment to celebrate fatherhood, celebrate families, bring those two parents together for that child, because they usually are connected quite well at that point, and create a system around them to support them as co-parents.
Okay, so we're going to open the floor to questions. And I know we have an extraordinary wealth of wisdom in the room, and we have an extraordinary wealth of wisdom up here. I want us to use our time to plumb their wisdom. So as you have questions, throw them at them. Get them to share what they know. Let us get even deeper into their thoughts. So we have students ready to bring you a microphone. Who has a question for one of our panelists? Back right there.
Okay. In regards to the children, the parents being able to see their child, where would they get that information?
So that's all dealt with. Whoops. So access to children that are born to unmarried parents is all handled through juvenile court. And on the second floor of the juvenile court building at 93rd and Quincy, there's an office called the Pro Se Center, where parents can go in and begin to file the paperwork to attempt to get custody, or at least a parenting time order. I will say that up until last December, we had an absolutely wonderful program also at the court that helped unmarried parents mediate custody relationships and parenting relationships, and unfortunately that was lost in a budget issue. So another reason to be advocates.
And then I know there's a question right here.
So this is for this question is for Mark and for Deborah. I'm wondering, where are you taking your programs? Like, is there a way to get them into various middle schools, for example, in public middle schools in the area? How do we get a school to embrace what you're doing and implement it and train all the staff and then also influence the families?
I think, we're in the infancy stage of disseminating the model. So far, we've run 2 groups with foster parents, and we're going to embed the model in our foster care program. And interesting enough, one of the kids, after his mother had been to a few of the foster mother had been to a few of the groups, wanted reassurance that she was going to continue because he noticed a difference. And we were very pleased about that. And the feedback from the foster parents have been great. And then we've done one group with biological parents at our Carl B. Stokes location on 55th and Woodland. But next we want to go to the schools. And I think you're thinking really big, and I like that, because I think the possibilities are endless. If you can help parents help their teenagers and they are happier as families, I think it can prevent placements, it can prevent, sort of tremendous unhappiness. So I think the person who asked the question is thinking absolutely right.
And to answer, is that on? Is that on? No. How about this one? Yes, I'd like to pass my answer over to Mr. Paul Hill Jr., who's sitting here, who's been programming here in Cleveland, in the schools and in other community centers. So can we? Thank you.
Okay, we're nationally as well as, in Cleveland, we have community partners all around the United States. We had our first national conference at Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center in 2010. 2013, we had our national conference in Baltimore. We've also expanded to Toronto, Canada, where we had our 2016 international conference. Our conference this year we've expanded to Great Britain, so we'll be in London, England at King's University. But as far as Cleveland, for 5 years, we've been in the East Cleveland Public Schools. Initially, they wanted us to do our programming after school. I said, no, it has to be during school because of the social emotional needs of our students, and it'll be a win-win situation. What we'll be able to provide for them as a result of a lack of social workers and psychologists in the schools, we can meet some of those needs. All my staff are retired, they're over 60, and I think it's important as far as involvement of some of our elders and seniors in some of the programming. Our youth really enjoy and develop a bonding relationship. We also, another program that we partner with in Cleveland that's doing an excellent job is Golden Cypress with Pam Hubbard. We did start back during the middle 90s when it was an independent school system in Cleveland, where we had a demonstration project in 4 Cleveland public schools. Then it expanded to 11. Then they turned the city over to the schools over to Cleveland, and all that just dissolved. Parents were maximally involved through the SCCs back then on a quarter of desegregation. But when that was dissolved and they turned the school over to the city, it became more political and less involved with parents within the community. But there is hope in all of the programming that we do around the country in LA, Chicago, Baltimore, where my son is with the Youth Resiliency Institute, the projects that he has within public housing within Baltimore. And Baltimore also has a relationship with East Cleveland, where we visit them, they come to us, vice versa.
I'm sorry I had to keep going out the room, but everything I heard was so interesting and so motivating for all of us to come together collectively. One thing we know with all things, and I'm going to talk to you guys, is how people have fear. And even in organizations, there's fear. And I think if we would collaborate and even build a manual where we could see what each other do, we don't have to repeat the wheel. We can use what's out there and start using resources to make and build our communities even stronger. So what do you guys think about a resource book where we can actually connect better? Because I've been around, our organization's been around since 1992, keeping kids off the street, going to programs. We were called the Life Obstacle Team, from radio to TV to the community. So if more people knew what we did and we knew what you did, we don't have to redesign. We can come together and build more foundations to do more, because everybody does something to improve the quality of life of someone else. So what do you guys think about is just having a collaborative, it's a lot of meetings, but a book of resources of each other. So if I'm missing this cue, no matter what city is in, I can find out how to connect that family if they call where nobody's left not getting the service they need because we don't do it, but we can look at our resources and say, oh, they do it. Let me connect you with them. So what do you guys think about a resource book of us coming together where I can look and see if I don't do it, I don't have to redesign it. I could give it to somebody else who's excellent in that field.
Charniece, actually, I'm thinking about you and your technology work. And I'm thinking about the real-time quality of the kind of questions you're asking. And I'm wondering if we're all having the same thought.
I was going to say to you that I think sometimes that there are pockets, like there's the county has collaboratives. And so there are a lot of organizations that collaborate. And so I agree, is because everybody has limited resources. And so we have to bring our little pockets together. But I think, to be perfectly honest, that agendas get into the way and we're competing sometimes. So I think the real conversation is that we have to remove our agendas and remember that we have these limited dollars, but we also have the same pocket we have these same children that we're all striving to help, and how can we work together? So.
We have another one right here, but one in the back, and then we'll do this one right here.
My questions is for Amber. With the Community of Hope, I know you said you had the round tables and you have new tables coming on board. I wanted more elaboration on how those tables work. Are they located within the communities, or are they just centralized at Children and Family Services, and some of the topics that are discussed? And then for Steve Kilpatrick, what are some of the needs that you're finding for the fathers that you've had the opportunity to work with? I understand that you're working on the policy end, but what are some of the key needs that they're finding as barriers when they're trying to develop that relationship with the family and personally as a whole?
So tables meet all around Cleveland, but we try to locate where the kids live, right? So wherever the young people live, the people from wherever they're from come together in that neighborhood where the young person lives. Many nights of the week, the YWCA on East 40th and Prospect is overflowing with table meetings. So it's really fun. It keeps things happening. We have, at the beginning, when we didn't have so many volunteers, we would recruit a group of people, put them together either as individuals or they would come from someplace together and want to volunteer together. And we would train them. It's a licensed model, so we use their training, and then we supplement with the stories that we have from 4 years of experience working with young people. And then we support those tables. Myself and Beverly Johnson, she's a staff person at the YWCA. It's the two of us. We're a two-person show. So we work together with each of the tables, and we want to try to help because these are volunteers, not social workers, and 6 hours of training will not give them everything they need to know to deal with our young people.
But the diversity of experience around the table is really, really cool. And it's what's been great is now we can have the young people have voice and choice about who sits around their table, right? Because now we have so many volunteers. So I pull applications based on either proximity, but mostly interest. People that I think are going to be really interesting to the young person. And then I let them look at those applications and they review who is going to spend time with them, right? Because it's their table and I'm trying to create lasting relationships. And the best way to get trust is to have them be a part of the process. If we're going to tell them they're the leaders of their life, we have to let them be the leaders of their life. So that's been a really awesome way of overcoming some of the initial engagement hesitations that we would have from young people who would start tables and then say, it's a lot of people, I'm not sure. But I'll tell you, we have 16 tables that are actively going on, 8 that have kind of graduated, or 7 that have graduated. Those 7 are still in relationship. 90% of those young people still have at least 1 to 3 people. My table's still going strong 4 years in. So that's what we're looking for. That first year is just to develop the relationship. We tell the table members this is a marathon, not a sprint. We are not really that interested in creating relationships that are going to end in a year. It's a waste of time. So that is how we do it. And we meet all over the city wherever it's convenient. Sometimes they don't want to sit around the table, so we go do fun things. So I don't want to take too much time.
So what do dads look for in help? Typically, they come to us looking for 2 things, jobs and help with child support. Those are stressors in their lives, but underneath that is them saying, I really want to be involved in my child's life and I don't really know how to. And dads don't necessarily come forth asking for help in that way. But underneath that, many of them have not had fathers in their own life because this is a generational issue. And so they want to be involved with their kids and they don't know how to spend time with them. And they also don't know how to negotiate for time with the mother of their children. So those 2 big issues that we really get to is how to be a parent and how to work on those relationship skills with the mother of your child.
Fantastic. And I think there was a question right here.
So actually, my question is for Charniece. Charniece, I know you work with schools and parents, and my question for you is, can you speak a little bit to some of the disconnects that you see between kids and teachers and how they communicate differently?
I think the biggest challenge is that with kids, schools have just changed. Yesterday, I was at a school and we had a bomb scare, and this is an elementary school, K-5. And they think a 3rd grader scribbled a note in the bathroom wall that they were going to bomb the school. And society has changed so much, and the demands on kids and teachers are so much. Teachers are now being nurses, they're the social workers, they're doing all these things in the classroom. Kids are coming to schools with such stressors, and so it's really, really difficult. And so, and families a lot of times are so overwhelmed by their responsibilities. And so again, the mental health, the services around this table, just connecting to our families are so many things that we need. For the academic component of it, I think that families need to know how to navigate a school. I think they need resources and support. I think that we ask parents to come to a school and we want them to be engaged and involved, but sometimes we don't explain to them what that means. We assume that everybody knows what the grade level standards and what they mean. Is that I should know that when you tell me in 5th grade that this is the level my child should be reading at, most parents are not aware of that. And so I think that just a little bit more sensitivity, creating opportunities for parents to become aware and being more open.
We have time for one more question, I think. Who's got a burning one? There's a burning one right there.
Point you, but it's not a burning question.
I'm sure it's awesome.
But on page 22 in the program, the email address for Charniece, where she works, needs the number 1 after family connections.
Okay, this is important. Let's do a burning question. Anybody got something that Well, anything that is on your mind before we leave today? One more question for our fantastic panel. Yes, in the back corner. Is that Lisa Veale? Yeah. Fantastic.
One of the presenters talked about hearing all the program work is really about generating hope. And I know, Lisa, you'll probably whip us through the panel one more time. But I sometimes think those of us who are in the program work, we lose hope because this work can be really hard. Being in relationship with people is emotionally draining, especially if you are willing to take the long view of being in those relationships. I'm wondering if each of you could share a little bit about how you maintain your energy and hope for the work.
Great question. Should we start with Steve? Should we just go that way and back?
Really good question, Lisa, and it's really easy to answer. Nice to see you. It's all about the kids. As soon as, if I get stressed about my relationships with adults or colleagues and I remember what the mission is, that it's about the kids, my hope comes back.
So it's so essential and sometimes so difficult. I think I draw from a couple of things. I mean, one is thinking about successes, which are amazing over the years, and that gives me hope. And I also think about, just the passionate hope that as a parent I had for my own kids and still do. My son, who is now 29, is an engineer who grew up with ADHD. And so I've had the amazing experience of dealing with many of the programs that people talk about from the other side as well. And that keeps me honest. But it also gives me hope because I've been in the trenches and I know that it's possible to come back and to have an amazing celebration of where people can get to in potential. And I try to communicate that to everybody else because I think it really is possible.
So obviously the young people are the fuel, but I would also say my faith is the fuel. I got into this because I wanted to do something that I felt was meaningful with what I believed about my faith. And so instead of just talking about it, what gives me hope is seeing people living out what they believe and loving people unconditionally, even when it's hard. So for me, hope comes from seeing people struggle and sometimes suffer and persevere. They continue with that commitment, and that just brings me so much hope. And seeing outcomes improve and seeing lives transformed, you just want to keep doing it.
For myself, I would say that I get a sense of hope and I get a charge out every time I hear any human being connect with their own voice. And whether that's artistically or intellectually or whatever that is. And the idea that one voice can change a community and inspire a community, and that a community can inspire the voice, to me is this amazing balance that I want to restore. I don't know why, but I'm driven.
I think passion is that I see all the great things that we do with our families, and sometimes what our goals are not necessarily their goals, but the differences that we make in their lives makes me realize that we're making a difference, and that keeps me hopeful. And there's not, I always have a new idea. Joanne, I don't know if you're sitting out there, or Karen, but Karen's always writing a grant because I always have a new idea, because when I see a problem, I want to make change, and so that's my passion. It's just making a difference.
You know how you go to college and you pick a career, and maybe you career from career to career or not. I was meant to be a social worker. I deeply care about the people around me. I deeply want to use my life to make a difference in their lives. And, in doing so, obviously, it enriches my life. But it's about the people. It's whether it's someone I'm supervising, whether it's someone I'm providing mental health services to, it's about the people and the mission for me.
Fantastic. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's first of all thank you guys. I do have a wrap-up question, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pose it to the panel, and while you think about your answers, I'm going to do housekeeping stuff, because I don't want to end on housekeeping. I want to end on our amazing panelists. So here is the question I'm going to ask you to answer in just a moment. If our audience could take one thing from what you said today, if there's one thing that you thought, if people learn nothing else from me today, this is the one thing I want them to learn from me today, what would that one thing be? In 10 seconds. Okay. Here is the housekeeping. While they think, here's what's going to happen. We'll have lunch, and then the City Club panel will start promptly at 12:25. What's going to happen is the wall is going to come up, and you will be dismissed in a systematic way by table to go get lunch. The front row, I will dismiss you when we're done. And then our fantastic support staff will come along and dismiss you as you go. And your ticket is in the back of your name tag. Okay, I think that's the housekeeping. All right, so let's start with you, Mark.
It's about relationships.
It's about relationships.
I was going to say that, Mark. I'm going to say just the transparency and the empathy and the communication and relationships and how they create a relationship.
And I would like you to think, remember that we're in the very infancy of understanding ourselves as members of communities, and community development is a typical word, but it's almost like child development. Do we even begin to understand what it is for a community to develop, and that each of us is a product and we are an extension of the communities that we either have or don't have?
My favorite African proverb says this: if we want to go fast, we go alone. If we want to go far, we have to go together.
So you already got the hope thing. So I guess I'm going for the second one, which is that people are resilient and they can change, and it's amazing, and I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Mine is simple. Redefine family through the heart and the eyes of our children.
You're here. Well, thank you, extraordinary panelists, and thank you, extraordinary audience. Okay, first table, you may go get lunch. First row. Please do. And please do. We're going to keep things rolling. Thank you all so much.